Walk into a British kitchen in 1955, and you would find dishes on the table that today's children could not even name. Not just unfamiliar, genuinely vanished. Foods that fed mining villages, factory workers, and farming families for generations, then disappeared so completely that most Brits under 50 have never tasted them. Some fell to the supermarket revolution. Others were finished off when fridges replaced cold pantries. A few were quietly buried by embarrassment, as Britain grew richer and decided certain foods belonged to a past best forgotten. Number 11 was once prescribed by Victorian doctors to nurse invalids back to health. Number 3 has been eaten in the East End since the 1300s and now survives in barely a handful of shops. We are counting down 20 forgotten British meals that have completely vanished from family kitchens. Let's begin with number 20. Number 20. Salmon paste sandwiches once anchored the British tea table with a soft pink reliability that no modern spread can match. Housewives prized the small glass jars of Shippums. Prince's salmon paste, kept in the larder for unexpected guests and weekend teas. By 1956, a jar cost just 9 pence and lasted a fortnight. The contents firm enough to spread thin across white sliced bread, cut into perfect triangles with the crusts removed. The taste was strong, briny, faintly oily, and unmistakably of the sea, even if the salmon content was a matter of polite ignorance. At children's birthday parties, salmon paste sandwiches sat beside fish paste, beef paste, and meat paste on tiered cake stands, their pink filling visible through thin slices of buttered bread. Oral histories recall the ritual of preparing the tea, the careful spreading with a butter knife, and the quiet pride in a paper plate that looked just so. When supermarkets brought fresh fish, prawn rings, and pre-made fillers within easy reach, the little glass jars retreated to the back of the shelf. Today, salmon paste survives in a handful of corner shops, its memory tied to grandparents' tea trolleys and the quiet ceremony of a proper afternoon tea. Bloater paste on toast carried the smoky tang of the Norfolk coast into kitchens far inland. Housewives bought small white pots of bloater paste at the grocer's for 6p apiece, spreading the dark grey mixture thinly on hot buttered toast for breakfast or high tea. The bloater itself, a whole salted and lightly smoked herring from Great Yarmouth, was once landed by the boatload, with over 40,000 tons hauled into the port at the trade's peak before the war. By the 1950s, the paste was the gentler face of bloater eating, the strong flavor concentrated in a form a child might just be persuaded to try. The smell was unmistakable, oily, smoky, faintly sharp, and it clung to the toast long after the plate was cleared. Diaries from the era recall fathers spreading bloater paste with relish at Sunday breakfast, while wives ate marmalade and quietly opened the kitchen window. As the herring fishery collapsed and tastes turned to milder spreads, bloater paste retreated from the corner shop. Today, only 1 or 2 manufacturers still produce it, and the smell that once meant breakfast in coastal Britain has all but disappeared from the morning table. Number 18. Brown Windsor soup once held court in railway hotels, regimental messes, and ambitious suburban dining rooms across Britain. A thick, dark broth of beef, mutton, and root vegetables that promised dignity, if not always pleasure. Housewives followed the recipe from Mrs. Beeton's or from one of the cheaper post-war cookery books, simmering scraps of meat with carrots, turnips, and a generous slug of Madeira until the liquid turned a deep, almost mahogany brown. By the 1950s, Brown Windsor was the standard opening course at boarding house dinners and works canteens, served in heavy bowls with a sprinkle of dried parsley and a slice of bread on the side. The flavor was strong, salty, and slightly muddy. A taste critics later mocked, but diners of the era accepted it as the proper start to a proper meal. Oral histories from former hotel cooks recall vast pots of brown Windsor simmering all afternoon, the smell heavy with onion and roasted bone. As clear consommes and continental soups arrived in the 1970s, brown Windsor began to look apologetically old-fashioned. By the 1980s, it had vanished from menus altogether, its legacy reduced to a punchline in sitcoms and a faint memory among those who remember when soup meant something brown and serious. Number 17. Mock turtle soup carried Victorian aspiration into the working-class pantry through a bright tin labelled in gold script. The original dish, born in 18th-century country houses, used a calf's head boiled for hours to imitate the prized but impossibly expensive green turtle soup of London's grand hotels. By 1955, most British families knew it only through Heinz, who sold their tinned version in shops across the country at 1 shilling a tin. The soup was thick, dark, and faintly sweet, flavoured with sherry and herbs. With little brown lumps the tin promised were turtle, but the housewife knew were minced calf or veal. Children stared at the rich, glossy soup with suspicion, while fathers, especially those who had served in the war, recognized it as the kind of gentleman's food they had once dreamed of. The tin sat on the shelf for special suppers, paired with toast soldiers and a sprinkle of pepper. Yet, as Heinz quietly discontinued the line, and a generation grew up unfamiliar with the very idea of a calf's head, mock turtle slipped from the British pantry. Today, the soup survives only in cookery history books and Lewis Carroll's Mock Turtle, a creature now stranger to children than the dish that inspired him. Number 16. Pikelets sat alongside crumpets on the tea tables of the North, a thinner, lacier cousin that no supermarket ever quite managed to capture. Housewives mixed flour, yeast, and milk into a slack batter, leaving it to bubble and breathe before spooning it onto a hot griddle without rings. The result was flat, holy and slightly chewy, ready in moments and meant to be eaten the same hour it was made. By 1953, pikelets sold for tuppence each at corner bakeries from Manchester to Wakefield, often slipped into a paper bag and rushed home while still warm. They were buttered thickly and stacked on a plate by the fire, sometimes spread with jam or dripping, sometimes eaten with a slice of brawn or a smear of beef paste. Oral histories from Yorkshire recall the rule that pikelets must be eaten on the day baked, never reheated, never frozen, never apologized for. Yet as plastic-wrapped crumpets took over the bread aisle in the 1970s, the proper pikelet became a local curiosity. Today, a few northern bakeries still hold the line, but the home-cooked pikelet, eaten warm from the griddle with butter melting through every hole, has all but disappeared. Singing hinnies whispered and sizzled their way across Northumbrian griddles, named for the soft singing sound the dough made as it fried in lard. Housewives mixed flour, currants, sugar, and a generous spoonful of lard into a stiff dough, rolling it out thick before cutting it into rounds and laying them onto a hot griddle plate. As the lard melted, the cakes hissed, sang, and slowly turned golden, the kitchen filling with a sweet, smoky scent that meant tea was minutes away. By the 1950s, singing hinnies were a fixture on Tyneside and in Northumberland tea tables, a regional treat unknown south of Durham. Children stood by the stove waiting for the first hinny to come off the griddle, where it was split, buttered, and eaten so hot it scalded the tongue. Oral histories recall grandmothers timing the bakes by the song of the dough, claiming a quiet hinny was an undercooked one. Yet the recipe demanded a griddle, lard, and time, three things modern kitchens steadily abandoned. As supermarket cakes and packet biscuits filled the cupboard, singing hinnies slipped from everyday tea, surviving now only in Northumbrian heritage cookbooks and the memories of those raised by the sound of a singing griddle. Devilled kidneys once sat at the heart of the British breakfast tradition, a sharp, peppery dish that woke the senses and the appetite in equal measure. Housewives, or in larger homes the cooks, bought lamb's kidneys for a few pence at the butcher's counter, split and trimmed them, then fried them quickly in butter with mustard, cayenne, and a splash of Worcestershire sauce. The result was rich, fiery, and unmistakably bracing, served on triangles of buttered toast as the first course of a proper breakfast, or as a savory at the end of dinner. By 1952, devilled kidneys still appeared in cookery books influenced by Mrs. Beeton and on the menus of London clubs, their preparation taught to brides as a sign of competence. The smell, sharp with mustard and butter, drifted through the morning house and announced that someone, somewhere, was being properly fed. Yet as cereal boxes filled the breakfast table and offal slipped from the family menu, devilled kidneys retreated to gentlemen's clubs and the occasional pub special. Today, the dish survives mostly in nostalgic restaurant menus, its place at the family breakfast taken by toast and jam, and the gentle apology of a packet of cornflakes. Number 13. Bath chap carried the unmistakable handshake of the West Country pig butcher, a smoked and brined pig's cheek, breaded and pressed into a cone shape for the cold supper table. Butchers in Bath and Bristol prepared chaps from the lower jaw of the pig, curing them in salt for days before boiling, breading, and chilling them into a striking pinkish-brown pyramid that lasted for weeks unrefrigerated. By 1958, a Bath chap cost around 3 shillings and was sliced thin onto plates with pickles and crusty bread, the meat dense, salty, and faintly smoky. It was the kind of food that asked for a strong tea and a stronger constitution. Oral histories from Somerset recall the Bath chap as a fixture of bank holiday picnics and harvest suppers. The cone passed around the table while children stared in fascination at its odd shape. Yet the chap was never going to thrive in the bright supermarket aisle. Its appearance was unsettling, its preparation slow, and its market shrinking with every closing pork butcher. By the 1990s, only a handful of Wiltshire and Somerset firms still made it. Today, the Bath chap is a heritage curiosity, kept alive by traditional butchers who refuse to let the cheek of the pig become a ghost. Number 12. Marrowbone on toast was the silent indulgence of the Edwardian and pre-war British table, a richness that asked for nothing more than a sturdy spoon and a piece of warm bread. Housewives bought a length of beef shin bone from the butcher for a few pence, asking for it sawn into short sections so the marrow could be coaxed out after roasting. The bones went into a hot oven for 30 minutes until the marrow softened and bubbled at the ends, then arrived at the table standing on a small plate with a special long-handled marrow spoon and toast to spread it on. The taste was beefy, buttery, and almost shockingly rich. A single bone enough to satisfy 2 adults. By 1955, marrow on toast was still a Sunday treat in many households, a way of using every part of the joint and turning a thrifty cut into something quietly luxurious. As ready-made gravy and meat extracts pushed bones to the edges of the kitchen, the marrow bone slipped from the family table. Today, restaurants charge £12 for a dish your grandmother served on Sunday afternoons for the price of a postage stamp. Calf's foot jelly was the prescription kitchen of Victorian and Edwardian Britain, a wobbling, almost translucent restorative spooned into the mouths of the sick, the elderly, and the recently delivered. Housewives or hired nurses simmered cleaned calves' feet for the best part of a day, skimming the broth, straining it through muslin, and clearing it with egg whites until the liquid was crystal clear. Sweetened with sugar, sharpened with lemon, and occasionally fortified with a glass of sherry, the broth set into a trembling, savory, sweet jelly, believed to rebuild strength faster than any medicine the chemist could sell. By 1950, calf's foot jelly was still recommended in nursing manuals and kept in pantries across rural Britain, often the first food given to a child convalescing from measles or an aunt recovering from a long winter. The taste was strange, meaty yet sweet, a flavor that belonged firmly to another century. As the NHS arrived with proper antibiotics and dietitians, the calf's foot was quietly replaced with jelly cubes and beef tea cubes. Today, almost no one remembers calf's foot jelly. Its disappearance is one of the cleanest of any dish on this list, a taste no surviving British supermarket has ever been asked to revive. Frumenty was already an old man among British dishes by the time the 1950s arrived, a cracked wheat porridge with roots so deep that medieval shepherds and Tudor farm workers had eaten essentially the same thing. Housewives bought pearled or cracked wheat from the corn merchant, soaked it overnight, then simmered it in milk with sugar, currants, and a grating of nutmeg until the grains burst and the porridge thickened to a rich golden cream. In rural Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, and parts of Cornwall, frumenty still appeared at Christmas Eve breakfasts, harvest suppers, and mothering Sunday teas well into the 1960s. The flavor was nutty, milky, and gently spiced, a comfort that seemed to draw on 1,000 years of British winters. Oral histories recall grandmothers stirring the pot with wooden spoons and warning children that real frumenty took 2 days to make. Yet as instant porridge oats and packet puddings filled the cupboard, the slow, patient ritual of frumenty fell silent. Today, the dish survives almost nowhere, mentioned only in folklore studies and the occasional heritage cookbook. A meal that fed Britain for 1,000 years vanished within a single generation, its bowl emptied and its memory faint. Number 9. Junket trembled on the British dessert table for nearly 500 years before disappearing in the space of about 20. Housewives warmed fresh, full-cream milk to blood temperature, stirred in sugar and a few drops of essence of rennet, and poured the mixture into shallow glass dishes where it set within minutes into a soft, custard-like curd. Topped with a dusting of nutmeg or a spoonful of jam, junket was the gentle pudding of childhood's lived before fridges, a dessert that demanded warmth, patience, and very fresh milk. By 1953, junket still appeared on tea tables across Devon, Cornwall, and the West Country, where the dairy traditions ran deep, and a bottle of rennet sat in nearly every pantry. The taste was mild, milky, and almost untouched, a quiet sweetness that asked the eater to slow down. Children either adored it or recoiled at its unfamiliar texture, somewhere between yogurt and custard, with no clear flavor to anchor either reaction. As pasteurized milk, packet jellies, and supermarket yogurts arrived, junket simply lost its niche. Today, the small bottles of rennet that once sat in every pantry are nearly impossible to find on the high street, and the gentle wobble of junket has slipped from British memory. Number 8. Sago pudding was the soft, milky cousin of tapioca, a dessert beloved by some children and dreaded by others in equal measure. Housewives bought small packets of sago pearls from the grocers, soaking them in cold milk before baking the mixture slowly in a low oven with sugar, butter, and a top dusting of nutmeg. As the pearls cooked, they swelled into translucent globes that floated through a creamy, lightly skinned custard, the dish emerging from the oven with a brown speckled top and a faint smell of warm milk. By 1954, sago appeared regularly at school dinners, hospital teas, and family suppers, often paired with a spoonful of red jam in the middle to break the milky monotony. Diaries from school days recall children either treasuring the dish for its gentle sweetness or protesting at the texture, which more than one comparison cruelly likened to frog spawn. Yet as instant puddings and packet jellies arrived in bright boxes, Sago slipped quietly off the menu. The pearls disappeared from supermarket shelves, and a generation of British children grew up never knowing what their parents had argued about. Today, sago pudding survives in care homes and a few stubborn family kitchens, a forgotten texture from a slower age. Tapioca pudding earned the nickname frog spawn among generations of British schoolchildren, and it never quite shook it off. Made from the starch of the cassava root, the small white pearls were boiled slowly in milk with sugar and vanilla until they swelled and turned translucent. The dish was sometimes baked in the oven to give an extra browned skin on top. By 1956, tapioca pudding was on the school dinner roster of nearly every British education authority, served twice a week with a single dollop of strawberry jam in the middle. Boys would stir that jam into the milky pearls until the entire dish turned a defeated pink. The taste was mild, creamy, and faintly sweet, but the texture was the lasting memory. Slippery, bouncy, and unmistakably alive on the tongue. Oral histories from school dinners recall children begging not to be served tapioca, and the rare child who confessed to actually liking it. Yet for all the complaints, tapioca pudding stretched milk, sugar, and a few pence of pearls into a filling, warming dessert that fed millions through the rationing decades. As packet pudding mixes and pre-made desserts took over, the great British frog spawn slipped from canteens and kitchens alike, leaving behind only its nickname and a lifetime of vivid school dinner memories. Blancmange wobbled at the center of every post-war British party table, its smooth, rounded dome a small triumph of housewifery and chemistry. Housewives mixed corn flour, milk, and sugar with a packet of Brown and Polson's blancmange powder, stirring constantly over a low heat until the mixture thickened, then pouring it into a fluted jelly mold to set on the cold larder shelf overnight. The next morning came the moment of truth, the gentle dip into hot water and the careful turning out of the mold onto a glass plate, the blancmange landing with a quivering wobble that drew children into the kitchen like a magnet. By 1953, blancmange appeared at children's parties, christenings, and Sunday teas across Britain, often served with tinned fruit or a bowl of red jelly cut into cubes. The flavor was mild, vanilla, raspberry, or chocolate, and the texture firm enough to slice but soft enough to feel slightly alive. As cream and ice cream replaced molded puddings, the fluted tin mold was packed away in lofts, and the careful art of unmolding a blancmange was lost. Today, the dish belongs to nostalgia. Its gentle wobble vanished from British party tables, along with the paper hats and crepe streamers it once shared the spread with. Number 5. Lardy cake oozed buttery sweetness across the West Country tea table for centuries before quietly vanishing from the everyday baker's window. Made with an enriched bread dough rolled and folded with lard, sugar, dried fruit, and a generous dusting of mixed peel, the cake was baked in a deep tin until the lard melted, the sugar caramelized, and the bottom turned almost into a sticky toffee. By 1955, lardy cake sold at village bakers in Wiltshire, Berkshire, and Hampshire for around £1 a slab, the slices gleaming with melted fat and crystallized sugar that pulled at the teeth. The smell, sweet, yeasty, and almost burnt, drifted out of bakeries on Saturday mornings and brought children running. Lardy cake was never elegant. It stained paper bags, dripped down chins, and left fingers shining. Yet that was its glory, a celebration of all the good fats and sugars that post-war austerity had taught families to revere. As lard fell out of fashion in the 1970s and seed oils took over the kitchen, the cake's central ingredient came to be regarded with suspicion. Today, lardy cake survives in just a few West Country bakers, its sticky, gleaming pleasure largely vanished from the British tea table. Number 4. Whitebait suppers once drew members of Parliament, dock workers and families alike, to the riverside taverns of Greenwich and the East End, where the tiny silvery fish were tossed in seasoned flour and deep-fried whole. The whitebait, young sprats and herrings no longer than a thumb, were eaten head, tail, bones and all, a crisp, salty mouthful served on a dish piled high with lemon and brown bread. By the 1950s, whitebait suppers were a working-class tradition along the Thames, the fishermen still landing baskets of the small fish, and the riverside pubs still advertising whitebait teas in chalked letters. Diaries from the period recall a plate of whitebait, a glass of stout, and a slice of bread for under 2 shillings, eaten by the river, while the tide pulled at the wharves. The taste was sharp and unmistakably of the sea, the crisp tails crunching like miniature crisps. Yet as river pollution grew, fishing limits tightened, and supermarket frozen fish fingers offered a tidier alternative. Whitebait suppers slipped from the British weekend. Today, the tradition lives on at 1 or 2 heritage pubs, and the occasional Lord Mayor's banquet, the silver shoals that once filled the Thames now passing largely unfried. Number 3. Jellied eels are the dish that survived 2 world wars, the Blitz, and 100 jokes at their expense before quietly being beaten by the supermarket. Eels were caught in the Thames and the marshes of Essex for centuries. The trade has been documented in London since the 1300s. They were chopped into thick rings, simmered with vinegar, bay, and pepper, and left to set in their own jelly in white enamel bowls. By 1955, every East End market had at least one jellied eel stall, with M-Mans and Cook's Pie and mash shops dishing out cartons of eels for 9p a portion to dockers, market traders, and families on a Saturday afternoon. The taste was sharp, fishy, and utterly distinctive, the soft white flesh giving way to a translucent, vinegary jelly that refused to be confused with anything else. Cockney pride wrapped itself around the dish. A true Londoner ate eels without flinching, while incomers turned pale at the sight. Yet as the Thames eel population collapsed, supermarkets stocked frozen prawns and tuna, and old East End neighbourhoods scattered to the suburbs, the eel stalls thinned year by year. Today only a handful of pie and mash shops still serve them, and a London tradition 700 years deep is now within living memory of vanishing entirely. Lobscouse was the dish that gave a city its name and kept its families fed through more lean years than anyone in Liverpool cared to count. Brought to the docks by Baltic and Norwegian sailors, lobscouse was a slow, simmered stew of cheap mutton or beef, potatoes, onions, and any root vegetables to hand, cooked until the meat fell apart and the potatoes melted into the broth. By 1956, scouse was eaten in nearly every working-class home in Merseyside at least once a week, the pot often topped up over several days, with bread and pickled red cabbage on the side. Families divided into camps over what made a proper scouse, meat or no meat, the meatless version known politely as blind scouse, and arguments over the correct thickness could divide neighbours for years. The taste was honest and beefy, the kind of supper that asked for nothing but a spoon and a hungry day's work behind it. Yet as supermarket ready meals filled Liverpool kitchens and the great dock trade contracted, the slow-cooked weekly scouse pot began to fade. Today, the dish survives at heritage cafes and stubborn family Sundays, but the everyday scouse that once anchored Liverpool's tables and gave the city its nickname has largely disappeared from the home kitchen. And finally, in first place, eel pie, mash, and liquor crowned the working-class London table as a meal so beloved it built its own restaurants, its own rituals, and its own quiet corner of British identity. Eel pie shops opened across the East End and South London from the 1840s onwards, with the trade peaking at more than 150 pie and mash shops in the capital by the 1950s. The pie itself was simple, chunks of eel set in a pastry case with a thick suet crust, served with a scoop of mashed potato pushed flat against the plate, and a ladle of bright green liquor. A parsley sauce thickened with the cooking water of the eels. The taste was mild, savory, and unmistakably of the river, the suet pastry softening into the sauce while the mash absorbed every last drop. Generations of dockers, costermongers, and East End families ate pie, mash, and liquor on Friday afternoons and after weddings, the meal so cheap that a family of 5 could be fed for less than 5 shillings. Yet as the Thames eels disappeared, the East End scattered, and supermarket-ready meals filled the freezers, the pie shops closed one by one. Today, fewer than 20 traditional pie and mash shops remain in London, where there were once hundreds. The everyday eel pie, served with mash pushed flat and liquor poured green, is now a heritage dish in its own city, a quiet reminder of a London that fed itself with eels from its own river and skill from its own kitchens. From salmon paste sandwiches at the start to eel pie, mash, and liquor at the very top, these forgotten meals tell a story not just of vanished food, but of vanished kitchens, vanished high streets, and a Britain that once knew how to feed itself from a tin of paste, a length of bone, and a few pence of cracked wheat. They were not glamorous. They did not photograph well, but they fed a country through hard times and quiet ones. Their disappearance is more than nostalgia. It is the slow forgetting of a way of life. Tell me which one your grandmother used to make, and which one you would still eat today.